Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. I've been thinking about making a channel for a while, and I've told people, yeah, I'm thinking of starting a YouTube channel. And a lot of them will ask me, well, what's your niche? What's the thing you'll talk about? And I struggled trying to decide on one thing because how do you pick one thing to talk about? I came into this wanting to share everything I'm thinking about, whatever comes into my brain. And if I want to interview someone in one video, I want to be able to do that. If I want to talk about books in a video, for example, this video, I want to be able to do that. If I want to cook something or talk about my plants or talk about spooky season that's coming up, hocus pocus. There's just so many things I want to chat about. So sit back, relax, and grab a snack if you want, because today we are talking about the 8 books I've read over the last 8 months, all recommended to me via Book Talk. I put off starting this channel for a while, mainly because I was like, well, what's one other person making videos gonna really do? And then I saw this interview with Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't know what show it was on, unfortunately. It's slipping my mind right now, but I'm butchering this. But basically she said something along the lines of, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? And as much as you maybe feel like, oh, I'm just like everybody else, what do I have to say? The fact that you are you makes you special. And I had to kind of just recognize it myself. I'm like, yeah, yes, there's people that talk about books or do this or do that, but none of those people are me. So without further ado, January 2022, I picked up this bad boy here, Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. Now this book kind of follows the not so love at first sight relationship between Tate and Miles. And it also has some jumps into the past with a character named Rachel. As someone being named Rachel, reading those chapters is always weird. I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks reading a character that has the same name as you makes it kind of weird, but it was. But those were actually the section of the books that I loved the most, because that story was really interesting to me, as it was kind of guarded by one of the characters in the book. I don't want to spoil this, but what I love about Colleen Hoover is when you get to the point when you understand why it's called Ugly Love, or when you understand why this is the cover art. And if you read this book, you know why it's the cover art, and you know that we all cried. It was just absolutely heartbreaking, and it was such a great book to start the year. I made a goal to read 1 book a month, and this definitely made it easy to get through month 1. So there we go. All right. February of 2022, I read The Song of Achilles. Now, this book, I did not know what to expect. I went into this solely buying this because of Book Talk, and I had seen it on everyone's must read, add this to your TBR. And I took a mythology class back in university, and I remember loving that class because it kind of reminded me of the fantasy world books I loved reading as a kid, like Harry Potter. And anyways, Song of Achilles, I was like, oh, mythology, so I'll like it. But I did not know what to expect. And again, at the end, I cried. I cried for most of these books. I really get emotionally invested in these characters. So they have such a beautiful bond. And it's a relationship that's been explored with a new lens that maybe history never considered. And I hope that everyone has a chance to read this, because it was equally beautiful and heartbreaking. And I think a lot of the books end up hurting my heart at some point. But yeah, Song of Achilles was for February of 2022. So good. All right, next we have March of 2022. I read Throne of Glass. Now, this book was recommended to me by Book Talk, but also my cousin. I'd seen it on Book Talk a bunch, but my cousin had it, and he's like, you gotta read this. I'm like, well, I've seen glowing reviews online, and you liked it, and I liked it. This was kind of my first step back into a real fantasy world. They describe it as if you like Game of Thrones and Hunger Games, which I adore both, you're gonna like this book, and I did. Selena, or I think it's Selena. Anyways, she is such a badass, and she was such a fun character to read with, because majority of the time, you're rooting for her, you trust her, you know that she'll make the best judgment based on what you would want to do. I mean, at least for myself, I really found myself aligning with her. and I want to read the next book, but there are 7 other books in this series, and I want to know what happens next for sure. But I also had so many other books on my TBR that were just sitting on my shelf, and if I started a series this long, I wouldn't have gotten through any of the other books over here. So, Total Glass, I'll have to come back to this because it was great, and I do want to know what's next. All right, April of 2022, I read They Both Die at the End, and this book in particular really made me hyper aware of what it means to be alive, and I loved it. It made me cry. No shocker. Basically, the premise is they have a system where they will text you the morning of the day that you die. It's like a 24-hour warning or something, or within that 24 hours you will die. Scary. Anyways, these 2 people both get the text, but do they both die at the end? I'm not going to spoil it, even though it's called They Both Die at the End. May of 2022, I read The Cruel Prince. Now this in itself is another series. I keep starting series that I haven't continued, but I want to, and they are on my to be read. I just have other things to get through. But this one here, it's great. I really enjoyed reading it. I want to know what happens next with Jude and her sister and the Cruel Prince, which I find out who that is in the book. But yeah, would recommend. Another amazing fantasy book. And I realize now that I really enjoy fantasy novels. Alright, so for June of 2022, I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. She is an author that I actually had the pleasure of meeting when I was working on a set once. I was the on-set photographer, and I had met her then, and then I actually interviewed her for my blog called Creating in Toronto, where I interview creators within the media industry. And she, when I interviewed her, said, oh yeah, my books came out next year, and she had told me about like that writing process and what it was like to go through this process and to follow her dream. She'd always wanted to be a writer, and it's funny because the character in the book kind of follows a similar career path as Carly does in real life, which I thought was really awesome. Having something based in Toronto also makes it really special, so congratulations to Carly on this. I'm so proud of her, and I can't wait for her new book, Meet Me at the Lake. I can't wait. But yeah, this was amazing. All right, we have July 2022. I read In 5 Years. Now, of all the books I read, they were all good. And this one's still good. This one, it didn't do it for me in the heart. Like, I obviously cried at one point, yes. But this one here, the character was hard to like. Near the end, her and another character did something, and because of the situation, it just didn't feel right. And like, but I think reading books where you don't always agree with the character is kind of good. So I really enjoyed this book. It was a nice quick read, and we'll see what happens in 5 years. And the final book is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. So I just finished this last month, and this was a tearjerker. My heart, like, it got broken and rebroken and healed. And honestly, again, when you get to the point where you understand why it's called It Ends With Us, if you know, you know. But this again was another book where it's like hard to agree with the character because like you don't understand, like you understand but you don't, because you didn't really live their life. But what I thought was really, really cute about this book is that there are diary entries addressed to Ellen DeGeneres, which kind of bring you into the past. And I thought it was really fun that like Ellen DeGeneres, of all people, was who they're writing letters to. But anyways, would recommend. Absolutely heartbreaking, but also so freaking beautiful. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. All right. These here are the 8 books that Book Talk recommended that I read, and I did. And yeah, I recommend all these. They're all good reads, especially if you're trying to get back into reading, like as much as you're maybe not sure where to start. Like one of these I'd for sure recommend as like your first go-to. There we go. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you next time. Don't know what it'll be about. Maybe more books. Maybe I'll be out and about, but we'll see. Have a good one.